Welcome to this week's Pascal's China Lens. And last week, for me, has been fantastic week. I mean, mind-boggling. I went from 1,000 subscribers to 5,000 subscribers and still running in just a week time. Took me 16 months to get to 1,000. I don't know what happened, but I really want to thank everyone who subscribed last week because this really makes the difference for me. And I'm going to create much more content from now on because I really feel you all enjoy it. Now, this week we're going to talk about the anti-monopoly law because this is something we've heard in the news. Beijing has asked or fined Alibaba with $2.8 billion fine. So what is it all about and what does it mean for the internet? If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, do so now. I would really enjoy because I want to go to 100,000 subscribers by the end of this year. For many, many years, I've been telling people that these data ecosystems, these Alibabas, these Tencents, I mean, they're creating these huge conglomerates in every industry possible, and they have so much data and insights that they can offer better service, better business models, better products to all these consumers, and this is really thriving in China. It's marvelous to see. But very often people were telling me, if that's the case in China, and it is, then this has everything to do with the regulation. It's because the foreign companies like Google, Amazon, Facebook are not allowed in China. It's because there's no rule of law in China, meaning even if the law is getting better, it's not getting executed, the penalties are very low, and so nobody really gives a damn. And on top of that, there has been this regulatory void for many, many years where companies like Ant Financial could suddenly become the biggest fintech in the world. And I've always said, give it a couple of years and we'll see what happens. Because China will get its act together when it comes to these laws and the execution of it. And just last week, when we saw that Alibaba got fined $2.8 billion, then everybody was saying, wow, this is serious now. This is for real. But everybody's now, and you see that in every media news space, talking about this Beijing power play. They want to have control over these giants. They don't want these platforms to grow. They have a grudge against Jack Ma. And so it's all, much of it is a negative connotation. Well, actually, we've been saying for many, many years that the reason that these platforms could grow so fast is because there was no regulation. Now there is a regulation. Why don't we see this as a good thing? So I see it as a good thing, and I'll explain why. Now, it all started really on October 24. That's when Jack Ma, at the Bund Summit in Shanghai, he gave a speech and basically said to these regulators, the new world of technology works differently. We're not going to fix our situation by abiding according to the regulations of the old world. And he might have said that, but it didn't really help much because a week later, the Ant IPO was stopped. And everybody connected these two. I think Jack Ma was just unfortunate to have said it at that time, but most likely because these regulations were already in the making, the IPO was already under discussion much, much before that and was stopped. And maybe it's a good thing for Ant because otherwise they would have to clean up house much bigger and have much bigger problems. So I don't know. But what's clear is that on November 10th, these new guidelines on the anti-monopoly law were actually made available. That was the first draft. And so everybody could look into it and really see that this is for real now. And every big platform, every big internet company in China will have to abide according to these laws. And then just 2 weeks later, we saw that China, Beijing, was looking into an antitrust probe and checking Alibaba to check what they did wrong, to take misadvantage or abuse their monopoly position against others. And so this started to becoming very serious, specifically when Jack Ma suddenly disappeared for 88 days. Everybody said like, wow, this is now the end of the internet world in China or internet giants in China. Now he reappeared after 88 days and everything was okay. Shares are back up, but there's a lot of discussions and things and panic that happened in the meantime. Now we have to look at this law in history. If we go back in time, this anti-monopoly law is not new. I mean, there's been an anti-monopoly law since 2008, and it took 13 years to build. So this is not something they just did overnight. So this is something that even when it comes to unfair competition, when it comes to price regulations, when it comes to rules on acquisition, specifically before it was about foreign companies acquiring Chinese companies, there was already a lot in place. But the difference now is that now it's also aimed at the platforms. It's aimed at the internet giants. And the reason they had a problem with using the old law for these internet giants is because many of them were actually having their holding company in the Cayman Islands. And so how do you regulate that? It wasn't so easy. And on top of that, many of these companies said they weren't a monopoly. And some of them, even WeChat, where everybody's using the instant messaging from WeChat, said, no, there's other instant messaging systems, and other, like WhatsApp, could also go to China if they abide according to the Chinese censorship. So, I mean, lots of discussion that didn't really get out of this problem. And if you look at these companies, I mean, they're huge. Companies like Tencent did 800 acquisitions over the past 12 years. Alibaba 400. I mean, they're really gigantic. And as the digital economy in China is now about 37% of the whole GDP of China and will be 50% by 2027, that means that these giants will control almost 50% of the GDP in China. I mean, if you would be Beijing, wouldn't you be worried? Of course, it makes sense. They need to be not controlled, but at least managed to make sure it stays healthy. And so what we saw just couple of weeks ago on February 7 is that this new law came out. And as soon as this new law came out, every company, every internet company started really looking at what they need to do and how to do it and change their whole structure and start restructuring the company to make sure that they actually abided according to the laws. Lots of discussions between Beijing and the internet companies working together on trying to resolve it. And so this is really more a cooperation than a control. Now, what is this all about? I'm going to give you a little bit of detail. There's four main things that they want to protect, or that the government or the regulators want to protect. They want to protect the market, the competitors, the merchants, and the consumers. And when we look at the market, the first thing, this is really about unfair selling of certain prices. So a lot of times with Singles Day or with group buying, they're actually selling below cost or giving huge discounts to attract consumers. And that is not really fair according to the Chinese regulators. And this is also what Europe has been saying about China when it comes to steel or other solar panels and so on. So this is really about antitrust. And even on December 24th, was only a draft of the anti-monopoly law, but already companies got fined because of Singles Day applications that they had or things they did on Singles Day. The second thing is really about this connection. And that means that some companies like, for example, Tencent, will not allow movies or videos from TikTok, the Chinese TikTok Douyin, to actually be posted or shared on WeChat. And that is not fair either, because it means that you're actually blocking out your competitors from actually using your platform. If you think about Alibaba, their Hema stores, you can't use WeChat Pay. And there's many, many examples that actually these companies do not want other people to use other services than their own. And that is not allowed either anymore. Now, the thing that was all about last week was about this big fine from Alibaba, and this is about the merchants, because Alibaba has been abusing its position to really tell every retailer, every brand, every merchant to say, you either choose us or you choose someone else. It was Shuan Yi in Chinese, and that means there's two possibilities. It's either Alibaba or maybe Tencent or Vipshop or someone else, Pinduoduo, and you have to choose us or you choose someone else. And that's not allowed anymore. And so they got fined $2.8 billion. Now this represents about 4% of their revenue of 2019. So for the investors in Alibaba, it's like, yeah, this is still okay, because it could have been 10. And it also means that now they can put this aside and keep going and keep actually restructuring and thinking about how to build Alibaba again. Now, the fourth thing is really about this big data discrimination. And this is quite interesting, because this has happened a lot. And this is the real power of these ecosystems, is the fact that Ant Financial, with all their payment system with Alipay, can get that data and use that data to benefit companies within Alibaba that might give like sharing or healthcare services or insurance. And so even within Ant, that happens. And that's not possible anymore, or should be changed, because this actually could help customers, for example, to get a loan but it could also harm customers. Someone with more money should pay more actually than someone else. And so China doesn't want this either. So these are all the things, the main things that are happening. Quite interesting. But what it isn't, it's actually that this regulation is aimed at Beijing having control over these tech giants. This is not about control. This is about something else. It's not a power play. It's not about trying to hurt these big tech. It's not about trying to limit these platforms. Because China, the government, wants actually these platforms to flourish. Because if you think about it, like Alibaba, they're doing a lot about elevation of poverty so that there's no more poverty, about inclusion by giving loans to smaller companies or people who have no opportunity to get loans. I mean, these are good things which helps the society. So Beijing wants to help these tech companies, but they need to be managed. It's also not to protect the state-owned enterprises or the banks or those that are established institutions. Because this is not about the banks, it's about the fintechs, the Alibabas or the Ant Financials that need to be regulated in a different way. And it's definitely not about Jack Ma. But these are all the stories that we often hear. What it is about protecting consumers. It's about protecting the small. It's about protecting all these SMEs and these retailers, these merchants. It's about protecting the market in itself. And most important, it's to fuel innovation, because unless they protect all these small players, it's very hard for people to start innovate, and also the big tech stop innovating because they have this power not to have to innovate and still grow every time just because they have all the data. That needs to stop. Now, if we want to understand these trends, a good thing is to look at the past. Looking at China, you have to start last century. 1999, 1998, when Alibaba and Tencent and other companies were starting to get into the internet space. And up to 2007, this was really copies from the West. I mean, they adapted it a little bit, but not much. And then later on, specifically after the Olympics, there was a lot of adaptation done. And that was because the consumer market in China changed. And so the consumer market started to have its own life, its own ecosystem on itself. And so the solutions became different than the solutions in the West. And these big data players, they actually benefited from it, specifically once 4G came available and everybody was mobile and everybody was using mobile phones and smartphones, then it became a data economy. It became about business model innovation, about service model innovation, about market model innovation, and doing great things like sharing and inclusion and all these things that we are learning now and that the West is starting to copy from China these days. But the next 10 years, it will all be about product innovation, because using this monopoly power will not be possible anymore to actually continue. And so these big data giants, these big companies will have to use product innovation, focus on basic research, on real product innovation and development to get to the next level. And so it's going to change everything. I can recommend all these 4 books. Specifically the last one, of course, because that is my own book, but it will tell you how I believe China this decade will start setting the standard of global innovation. So what I think this is all about, this anti-monopoly law, this is all about letting more people grow their own innovation and do their own thing. And so everybody should actually have their own roots and not take nutrition from somebody else. And that's what it's about. It's about getting rid of all these big silos and make sure that actually everybody could be in every silo, because it's just one big silo, China then. It's not about Alibaba and Tencent and Meituan and ByteDance. No, these big silos, it has to be open innovation, open collaboration, much more transparency. And this will fuel innovation, but it will also help a lot of smaller players, startups, scale-ups, to actually grow faster and not get acquired by the big guys who see, because they have cloud computing available, they see when to acquire these guys and actually limit their growth and helping their own growth. So that will all help, will all change. And what I think is happening now is that while we in the West right now see this control and this regulation as something about limiting and prohibiting, actually, I think China wants to do the exact opposite. They want to take out these walled gardens, and they want to break down these walls and not have these walls and these silos. And they want to create much more freedom for the smaller guys, which means it becomes a rainforest of innovation and opportunity. And so I believe this anti-monopoly law gives a lot more freedom than it gives control. So I see this as a lot more freedom coming up. Now, I don't know what you think. Maybe you think it's going to be more control. Could be. Maybe these internet giants are really going to get challenged now. I believe it's actually a new opportunity, and not just in China. I actually think a lot of these companies, Ant Financial, Alibaba, JD.com, all these companies like Didi, because of this new regulation, not only will they have more innovation that fuels it, but they will also start looking at foreign markets even more than before, because there's new opportunities there. And so we can expect a lot of these Chinese innovators to come to the global and Western markets very, very soon. Now, I hope you liked it, and see you definitely next week for another episode on Pascal's China Lens.